From the very beginning, the police knew they were dealing with something truly heinous. But it wasn't until almost 27 years later that they were able to prove it. On May 10, 1990, in Cape Coral, Florida, the local mom Jan Cornell got back from doing some grocery shopping, only to find her 11-year-old daughter Robin Cornell dead inside their apartment. Not only that, but so was Robin's friend Lisa Story, who was just 32 years old. Both women had been strangled, but that was far from the only thing that made this such a sinister scene. What was it about this crime scene that made it so sinister? You're about to find out. It seems like every single detail of this crime scene pointed to nothing less than evil. To start, both bodies were found lying face down on the same bed. And when the police say face down, they really mean it. Their faces were completely flat against the mattress. Moreover, it wasn't like the killer had tried to hide anything. In fact, he or she had actually tried to clean up a bit. That included showering and even washing their clothes. If that weren't enough, the perpetrator had also rummaged family photos off the wall and tossed them onto the floor. They then took a number of valuables, including cash, credit cards, and driver's licenses. But what is perhaps most unsettling is that the killer left behind what seemed to be calling cards, including a half-smoked joint and a used condom. At first glance, it might seem like this case was pretty straightforward. The police had a murder weapon, a potential motive, and seemingly ample evidence to convict the culprit. But here's where things get tricky. The police don't know if they're dealing with a single killer or multiple perpetrators. Even worse, the only description of the killer comes from an unreliable source, Jan Cornell, who could only describe one of her attackers. Although she couldn't remember much else about him, she did recall that he had reddish-brown hair, a mustache, and was wearing a white t-shirt. She also recalled seeing another man fleeing the scene, although she didn't get a good look at him. As it turns out, those descriptions would come back to haunt the police. After interviewing a number of people who matched the description, they eventually let the case go cold, which is why it makes sense that there are no mugshots of the actual killer. Unfortunately, this meant that the police were pretty much stuck. They needed tangible evidence, something they could actually use to convict a perp. With none of the leads panned out, the future of the case looked bleak. Then came the forensic breakthrough that gave hope to the dying embers of the investigation. This was back in 2016 when a woman named Catherine submitted her DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public genealogy website. She was trying to figure out where her biological relatives came from and what they had been up to. But little did she know that her DNA results would lead to one of the biggest breakthroughs in Cape Coral history. The results revealed that she was related to Joseph James Zieler. Not only that, but another person submitted their DNA to the site, and it matched hers. But this person was identified as the notorious serial killer Joseph Zieler. But how does this all connect to the deaths of Robin Cornell and Lisa Story? Well, if you think you have a theory, stick around because we're about to dive into it. Here's where things get a bit complicated. Just before submitting their DNA to GEDmatch, Joseph Zieler had been arrested for shooting his own son with a pellet gun. When police searched his house, they discovered numerous weapons, some of which were used in other crimes. What's more, they found a number of items that were stolen during the Robin and Lisa's murder, including credit cards, ID cards, jewelry, and pornographic magazines. Finally, Joseph's criminal record contained a number of strikingly similar cases dating all the way back to the 80s. So now police began wondering whether Espa or not Joseph was responsible for the deaths of Robin and Lisa. All they had to do was collect his DNA and run it through the system. In 2018, more than 27 years since the incident, the police finally had a match. They had the killer. Joseph Zieler was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. His arrest became one of the most talked-about events of the year, especially in Cape Coral. It was a day filled with cheers and celebrations. When announcing his arrest, Captain Anthony Sizemore of the Cape Coral Police Department said, We can put an end to it today and tell the family of Robin Cornell and Lisa's story that we can bring these charges based on the evidence we have against him for their homicides. The family members of the victims were understandably shocked by the arrest. They had never imagined that the case would ever be solved. For them, it was like reliving a nightmare, except this time they were waking up and it was real. Lisa's brother, Patrick's story, spoke to the press following the announcement, saying, "I'm surprised, I'm shocked, I'm elated, I'm happy. A lot of emotions right now. But mainly, I just want to thank the Cape Coral police officers. They never gave up. I promise you that." For Patrick, it was also an emotional moment, because it marked the first time that he had learned his sister S. body had been found in the same condition as Robin S. He told reporters, "She was lying next to my sister, and I am very thankful for that, because now I know my sister died the way that my brother-in-law's daughter died." Finally, Jan Cornell, Robin's mother, spoke to the press about her feelings towards the verdict. She said, "This has been a roller coaster of emotions. But I've waited 29 years for this, so I know he did it." As you can imagine, the evidence against Joseph was overwhelming, and the state prosecutor decided to forego the death penalty, instead opting for a life sentence without parole. Nevertheless, he was given the option to plead guilty to the lesser charge of second-degree murder. But when the time came for him to enter his plea, he chose to plead not guilty. So there was no choice but to move forward with the trial. From the start, prosecutors argued that the evidence was clear. They believed that Joseph entered the apartment through the back door, which had been left unlocked. After taking a shower to clean himself up, he changed into a fresh set of clothes and proceeded to murder Robin and Lisa. Finally, he stole whatever he could and fled the scene. However, Joe's lawyer argued that the lack of physical evidence was reason enough to raise reasonable doubt. According to the defense, not only was there no fingerprints or DNA evidence, but also no solid eyewitness accounts. Therefore, the whole case was essentially circumstantial. But in spite of these arguments, the judge overseeing the case ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with the trial. And so the wait for justice continued. And it would take another 3 years for it to finally happen. During the trial, the state prosecutor read the chilling confession that Joseph had sent to Jan Cornell in prison. In the letter he wrote, "I know you want answers. I am sorry for taking your daughter away from you. I never meant for it to happen the way it did. There were so many things that went through my mind and they wouldn't stop, so I just acted out of self-defense. I don't want to hurt anyone. I love my children. Your daughter fought back a little bit. I know this won't bring Robin back, but I'm sorry for your loss." While reading the letter, Jan Cornell broke down in tears, but she managed to remain composed. When asked by the prosecutor, "Can you look at Mr. Zieler and tell the court who he is?" she replied, "He's a liar and a murderer." However, Jan didn't have to testify. Later, the judge ruled that the confessions alone were enough evidence to secure a guilty verdict. Joseph's sentencing was carried out on June 13, 2023. Now, rather than being led away in handcuffs, he was wheeled out of the courtroom in a wheelchair. Having been diagnosed with terminal cancer, he only has months to live. And instead of giving his side of the story, he told the judge, "May God have mercy on your soul, sir. I do believe in capital punishment, but I'd rather die by lethal injection than in a wheelchair waiting to die." And with that, he was sentenced to death by injection. To this day, it remains unclear what exactly motivated Joseph to commit such atrocities. And while nothing can bring Robin and Lisa back, their families are grateful that justice has finally been served. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. If you have any thoughts, questions, or opinions about the case, leave them in the comments below. We'll see you next time on Nyte.